with nephews Jamie, Damien, and Benjamin, and with Larry, of course, who has put so many of these celebrations of life together. There are so many friends who were just like chosen sisters and brothers. And so we come together, no matter what is our mourning, to shed a tear, to silently remember, to laugh, because Carla would want us to laugh. And don't forget to eat, because we always have to eat. And so we continue with readings that are to call Carla and her magnificent life to mind. At all funeral services, the 23rd chapter of the book of Psalms is said. It's venerated by Jews and Christians alike. It's known by heart by countless millions of people who recite it to find comfort and sustenance and rootedness. Psalm 23 is a small psalm with just 6 sentences, 57 Hebrew words. However, it has become such a cherished gem that people recite it in moments such as this. It's to give us comfort and stability. The words themselves, Adonai ro'i lo echsar binadesha yarbitzeni almei menuchot yanahan leini. And together we read, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me lie down in green pastures, leads me beside still waters, and restores my soul. You lead me in the right paths for the sake of your name. Even when I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God forever. Also, with Psalm 121, we are told, we raise our eyes to the mountains and the formations of nature, from where my help will come. Our help comes from God, the maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way. Your guardian will not slumber. The guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. For Adonai, the name of our God, is our guardian. Adonai is our protection at our right hand. By day the sun will not strike us, and the moon by night. God will guard us from all harm. God will guard our life. God will guard our going and coming forever. One of the most beloved readings that Steve loved so much, that we read at every family celebration of life and funeral and burial. This I will always think of as his reading, and I will always see him standing here reading it. And so I believe his soul is reading it for Carla. Birth is a beginning and death a destination, and life is a journey from childhood to maturity, from youth to age, from innocence to awareness, and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion, and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength, or strength to weakness, and often back again, from health to sickness, and back we pray to health again, from offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not in some high place along the way, but in having made the journey stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination, and life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage to life everlasting. Well, do I remember when Ruth became a bat mitzvah here, and we had brand new prayer books. And I had skipped all the poetry because I am the least poetic soul in the world. But no, Ruth and her mom said, no, we are doing a poetry service, and picked every single poem out. So for Carla and for Ruth, I gathered some poems that I knew very little about, but that made me think of Carla and all she stood for. Following the death of King Edward VII in 1910, Henry Scott Holland wrote a sermon and created the poem, "Death is Nothing at All." Death is nothing at all. It does not count. I have only slipped away into the next room. Nothing has happened. Everything remains exactly as it was. I am I, and you are you. And the old life we lived so fondly together is untouched, unchanged. Whatever we were to each other, that we are still. Call me by the old familiar name. Speak of me in the easy way you always used to. Put no difference into your tone. Wear no forced air of solemnity or sorrow. Laugh as we always laughed at the little jokes that we enjoyed together. Play, smile, think of me, pray for me. Let my name be ever the household word that it always was. Let it be spoken without effort, without the ghost of a shadow upon it. Life means all that it ever meant. It is the same as it ever was. There is absolute and unbroken continuity. What is this death but a negligible accident? Why should I be out of mind because I'm out of sight? I am but waiting for you, for an interval, somewhere very near, just around the corner. All is well, nothing is hurt, nothing is lost. One brief moment and all will be as it was before. How we shall laugh at the trouble of parting when we meet again. And Christina Georgina Rossetti was an English poet who is best known for some of her children's poems, but her poem, "Let Me Go," has become so popular because it is so beautiful. When I come to the end of the road and the sun has set for me, I want no rights in a gloom-filled room. Why cry for a soul set free? Miss me a little, but not for long, and not with your head bowed low. Remember the love that once we shared. Miss me, but let me go. For this is a journey we all must take, and each must go alone. It's all part of the master plan, a step on the road to home. When you are lonely and sick at heart, go to the friends we know. Laugh at all the things we used to do. Miss me, but let me go. And finally, a poem that people do not know who wrote it. They don't know the name of the author, but it is still considered a funeral reading because of its beautiful sentiment. Right now, I am in a different place, and though we seem apart, I'm closer than I ever was because I'm there inside your heart. I'm with you when you greet each day, and while the sun shines bright, I'm there to share the sunsets too, with you every night. I'm with you when the times are good, to share a laugh or two, and if a tear should start to fall, I'll still be there for you. And when that day arrives that we no longer are apart, I'll smile and hold you close to me forever in my heart. Also, the poet, Epitaph, the poet Merritt Malloy wrote Epitaph, a poem and a reading that we have read many times at the various share celebrations of life, because it is this family who knows how to give love. When I die, give what's left of me away to children and old men that wait to die. And if you need to cry, cry for your brother walking the street beside you. And when you need me, put your arms around anyone and give them what you need to give me. I want to leave you something better than words, better than sounds. Look for me in the people I've known or loved. And if you cannot give me away, at least let me live on in your eyes and not on your mind. You can love me most by letting hands touch hands, by letting bodies touch bodies, and by letting go of children that need to be free. Love doesn't die, people do. So when all that's left of me is love, give me away. I guess we could say that Carla was sort of a rock star. I don't know about her musical abilities. Yes, no, maybe. Cello, of course, but singing, I'm not so sure. Cello on rock, I'm not sure. But I was told by Ruth that she enjoyed geodes. She fit right here in the Jewish community, not as a rock star, but as a rock star. Consider how we refer to God as Tzur Yisrael, Rock of Israel, in the prayer that we say right before we stand up for the Amidah, our standing prayer. And Marty and Ruth might remember phrases like Tzur Olamim, or the song Ma'ot Tzur for Hanukkah, Rock of Ages. At the end of our prayer, at that standing prayer, we have a silent prayer, and it ends with the psalmist's words, Yihiyu l'ratzon, may the words of my mouth be acceptable, and it concludes calling God Suri v'go Ali, my God and my Redeemer, my rock. The words for rock or stone are mentioned more than 100 times in the Hebrew scriptures. In Genesis, we read that Jacob used a stone as a pillow. In Exodus, God put Moses in the cleft of a rock so Moses won't see God pass. In Numbers, after Moses struck a rock twice, God told him he doesn't get to go to the promised land. And near the end of the 5 books of Moses, in his farewell poem, Moses says, Adonai is the rock and God's work is perfect, and all of God's ways, even the ones we don't understand, are justice. The beautiful psalm that we read, Esa'anai, says that we find our sustenance by looking up to the mountains and the rock formations. I hope you see where this is going, because Carla could so easily herself be described as a rock. She was solid, she was steadfast, she was unwavering. She might have even been a little stubborn at moments, immovable, but we won't go there today. Carla and Steve raised Marty and Ruth here, but then they moved away 2 decades ago. And yet time and again, the family has returned here to say goodbye to their beloved family members, grandparents, Steve and Cheryl. Carla also lost her mom and went to California to navigate the journey of the final arrangements there. And through it all, she was a pillar of strength. She faced the vicissitudes of life with stoicism and humor. Gallows humor, of course, but humor nonetheless. Since she was no stranger to arranging things, she was ready to face life with illness and her own demise with lists and preparations and arrangements and plans so that no one of us would have to navigate that well-worn path of mourning that she had traveled so often. She was like a rock in the stream of life, with the currents of COVID and then cancer and death swirling around her resilience. And through it all, she stood so firmly. Even as she was a rock in the face of death, she was a firm lover of life. As Ruth had shared, she loved those rocks and geodes, but she had so many hobbies and talents and enthusiasms as well, from her music to knitting, to poetry, to puzzles, to language, from enjoying nature and travel and cruises, to a zest for good food and wonderful friends. She was so smart and had the driest sense of humor. She lived life to the fullest and was happy, so happy to have Ruth and Marty nearby these last years. Even while ill, Carla enjoyed having her friends and family visit her, and she went on that amazing river cruise we'll probably hear about just last spring. Carla lived life and she left life in her own stubborn way, planning carefully, making each choice for herself and making sure that the path was free of stumbling blocks and obstacles for us, her survivors. She went into her last treatment optimistically. We had a wonderful long talk before she was ready to start a new round of treatment. She said she wasn't afraid, but just didn't relish the discomfort. And then the next week, things changed rapidly, and Carla gathered her beloveds around her and was able to be delivered into the next life by caring hands and loving hearts. You all gave her that gift, and for that, I know she was profoundly grateful. The famous meme might well have been written by Carla when it says, cancer is so limited. It cannot cripple love. It cannot shatter hope. It cannot corrode faith. It cannot eat away peace. It cannot destroy confidence. It cannot kill friendship. It cannot shut out memories. It cannot silence courage. It cannot reduce eternal life. It cannot quench the spirit. Not only is Carla our rock, but our memories of her are rock solid as well. Just as a rock endures the test of time, all of your wonderful memories of this brave, smart, sassy, irreverent, holy soul will endure in our hearts and minds. Carl Jung viewed rocks as one of the primordial symbols of eternity. That's why we carve into tombstones the names of our loved ones as a way to memorialize for eternity their presence on earth. Of course, it wasn't the choice of Steve or Carla to be interred or memorialized with a large headstone. They didn't want us to build tombstones of rock for them, but to be memorialized in a living, fluid monument that would become our lives. Nonetheless, that curious custom of laying tiny rocks or stones in Jewish cemeteries might give us some comfort as we say goodbye. When you go to a Jewish cemetery, you don't see flowers planted around the tombstones, but you see piles of stones adorning the markers, apparently placed with no specific pattern. Outside of the Jewish faith, and even inside the Jewish faith, there may be little familiarity with the practice. Not surprisingly, there are a number of theories about how the practice began. Unlike many Jewish practices, placing stones is not a commandment, it is not a law, it is just a custom that evolved over time. The specific origins of the practice have been lost to history, but a number of theories have been put forward that remind me of Carla. The practice may symbolize the permanency of Carla in our memories. According to Jewish scholars, the Hebrew word for pebble is sror, which can also mean bond. And in the El Malei Rachamim prayer, which we will chant, it says, may she be bound, may she be rock solid in the bonds of life. And so placing this sur or tzror at the graveside signifies that indeed we have been to the graveside to remember her and to pay tribute, and that Carla would be as permanent and as solid as stone in our memories. The stones also attest to the permanence of the soul. That's why there are no flowers at Jewish funerals and why mourners don't plant flowers at the Jewish grave sites. Flowers represent the impermanence of life. They are born, they blossom, they wither, and they die. But stones have a permanent existence, just like the soul and the enduring memory of Carla and Steve and all that went before. And finally, the stones that we leave as a sign of memorial are a sign of our regard and respect. It lets the world know on the anniversary of a death or on other memorial times how alive Carla's memory is with us, how vivid are her words and deeds and lessons for each and every one of us. So we won't go to one location to remember Carla, not a cemetery, not a mausoleum, not the ocean or the Grand Canyon or the muddy Mississippi River, or maybe we'll go to all of these places to remember her. Instead, she will be within us. The poet has written, she whom we love and lose is no longer where she was before. She is now wherever we are. We will feel her love and hug and warmth when we wrap one of her knitted creations around ourselves. When we trip on some cool rock or shell along our path or a root on our path, we'll stop and take notice and probably assume she put it there as a practical joke. When we play a particularly good board game or finish a puzzle or hear a wicked joke or appreciate a sunset or eat a piece of chocolate or hug a dear friend or family member, it will be Carla who is with us. While Carla is what I call Jewish adjacent, she loved the poetry and the reasonableness of Judaism. She would not want us to go to some rocky graveyard to find her. Her address is now inside of you. It is in your hearts and souls. and she will watch over your every joy, and you will hear her words of wisdom and advice and gratitude every step of your lives, the moments of victory and the moments of defeat, because the doors to your soul will never shut her out. She will soar as high as you allow her to ascend. This family has had a lot of grief, because to live means to lose. And well, have we learned these past years that we can't always have what we want. 61 is so young. It's way too soon. But then again, we would feel that way if Carla had lived to 71 or 81 or 91 or 101. And in having Carla for the short time we did, we got so much. For Steve and she had 31 great years of marriage. Her kids had an entire childhood and were able to become wonderful adults under her watch and care and love. She was a gift to the Scher family that Steve brought to all of you. And she was the dearest sister and sister by choice, with her close friends who fed her and shopped for her and nurtured her and shared her secrets and schmoozed and laughed and ate and cried with her. With Carla, you were indeed blessed, even as you were a blessing. No, we can't always get what we want, and we can't always finish what we start, but we are among the blessed, for whom Carla was a rock and a refuge and a fortress of love. In our tradition, we say she has been gathered onto her kin. And so, as Larry wrote in his tribute to her, Carla, please tell Steve, Mom and Dad, Cheryl, and your mother that we love and miss them all. And so we hear some words of beloved memory from some of her friends and family.
Okay, so they made me go first. And I think I drove from UD about as fast as I've ever driven, because I taught this morning, and almost every single light on Wilmington was green all the way here, so, you know. Okay. So I was sitting in my computer last weekend, trying to decide what to say, and realizing it was all too much and not enough. I made the mistake of looking at my email and found a message from American Queen Voyages, the company with whom we took our river cruise last May. And it said that the company is shutting down and being sold, and all the future American Queen Voyages have been canceled effective immediately. I immediately thought of Carla and how sad this would have made her. The absolute highlight of the last few difficult years was our river cruise on the American Countess last May. And Carla chose that trip and planned out the whole thing, and all of us, Karen and Chris, and Carla and I had a blast. We spent so much time sitting on the deck and watching the shore pass by and the beautiful sunsets, and we marveled at the locks, the ship going in the locks, and pulled out our Google Maps to figure out what strange sights we were passing as we wound around the turns in the river. We saw the National Quilt Museum and explored small towns along the way, and we ate so much delicious food, sometimes having 2 desserts each. And tasted new drink concoctions. It was the perfect trip. Carla happened to be on the deck one day when a local TV station was doing a story about the riverboats bringing increased commerce to the small river towns, and they interviewed her. And I can show it to anyone who hasn't seen it. It was a lovely interview, and Carla talked about why she was on the cruise and about her cancer. And when the crew saw the interview, they sent a huge bouquet of flowers to our room for Carla with a sweet note of thanks and best wishes for her health. And while Carla was a great planner, she didn't plan for what the rest of us would do when she wasn't here any longer. For example, will I ever learn how to knit properly? She tried to teach me. I made a few wonky scarves and some socks, but when I was visiting her and tried to make a hat, she told me I should rip out the whole thing and start over. She was a perfectionist for sure. When she lost her hair, she knitted a series of caps to wear, and I say a series because she continued to tweak her design until she got the perfect cap to fit her head just the way she wanted it. And I can't really remember when we first met. Karen and Carla and I all lived in the same dorm at Wellesley, and Karen was a junior and I was a sophomore, and Carla arrived from California her first year, and somehow the 3 of us have been friends ever since. Carla and I wound in and out of each other's lives for the next 44 years. Most of you have probably heard the story of Carla meeting Steve at my wedding in Louisiana. And then when I was living in Champaign, Illinois, Carla took a job at the Lincoln home in Springfield, Illinois, which is not too far away. And she lived in this really odd attic apartment, and we saw each other pretty often. And then a few years after she married Steve and moved to the Dayton area, I took a job at Antioch and moved to Ohio, and we were present at that point at each other's weddings and births, and many holidays and kids' sleepovers and play dates and parties, and we worked together for a few years as well. I didn't see much of her once they moved to Virginia, but we kept in touch. Once our kids were a little older, we started planning get-togethers along with Karen, and we would meet up and continue whatever conversation we'd been having over the years, and no matter what we were doing, we were talking and laughing. And some things I will always associate with Carla: her love of gardening, baking bread, puzzles, chocolate, especially dark chocolate, and good coffee with real cream. She was an amazing gardener, always growing something, even if it was only houseplants. She started composting way before it was the trendy thing to do. She inspired me to try my hand at gardening, but I'm actually pretty terrible with plants. When I was out in Virginia last year, Carla and Karen and I went to her favorite giant garden center, and we all, of course, came away with plants. And I know hers flourished, but one of mine died like right away. I still have the other, but it's not really very healthy. One thing, just a sort of random thing I remember, is when she was in NOAA Corps, and she was aboard the NOAA ship Discoverer, called the Disco, and at some point she was the gravity officer aboard the Disco. And I have no idea what that really meant, like what a gravity officer does, but I just thought it was hilarious. When COVID hit, Carla and Karen and I started Zooming every Saturday at 2 o'clock. This was an anchor and a blessing for all three of us. We talked almost every week for the last 4 years, and usually texted multiple times in between. We sent emails with recipes and funny videos. We reported on our week's activities, talked about our feelings, the ups and downs of our lives, how our kids, families, friends were doing. We celebrated and commiserated. When Carla got sick, Karen and I tried to support her as best we could. Karen especially took on the lion's share, being closer and without the constraints of a job. People would say to me, "You're such a good friend," but really, I never felt it was something unusual. She would have done the same for me, and it was never a hardship to spend time with dear friends, even if it's in hospitals instead of on cruise ships. I feel like Karen and I walked this path with her step by step for the last 2 years, and I'm honored that Ruth and Marty welcomed us to be there at the end. The last few days at NIH were hard, but I'm so glad I was there to be part of the circle of love around her. When the 5 of us, Ruth and Marty and Larry and Karen and I, packed our bags and walked out down the hallway, we exited the elevator and hugged each other goodbye that last afternoon at NIH. I felt like we had done something profound and important. Carla, we'll miss you dearly, and I hope you're off having grand adventures.
How do you sum up a 43-year friendship that began as an undergraduate in college when you didn't know as much as you know now? I've been agonizing over this for weeks. It seems everything and nothing is said when you try to compile your stories. I can tell you that we had wild times in the academic quad and left a trail of discarded boyfriends in Harvard Yard, but that would be lying. And we were both introverts, and Wellesley wasn't that kind of place back then, or probably even now. But it's really just the hundreds or thousands of ordinary, everyday things of life. We shared a love of dark humor and snarky remarks, and Carla excelled at both. And if you spent any time with her, you know this very well. Little do we know upon our meeting that this snarkiness and dark humor would give us a lifeline, a coping mechanism at the end of her life. We both had a tendency to laugh at things that were perhaps not appropriate, gallows humor that Rabbi Judy mentioned. We constantly had to explain to others that we were laughing at the way things were phrased, not necessarily the content. This was especially true following her cancer diagnosis. We would find humor in really terrifying procedure names and statistics. This caused raised eyebrows among the staff of the various hospitals. Oh in which she received treatment, but just until they knew her a little better. When she was admitted to the National Institutes of Health for her trial drug study, they said, "We've heard that you had a way with words," when she made some kind of quip about one of the procedures or what was going to happen to her. And Carla's response was always, "I may be dying, but I don't need to be a jerk about it." She actually used a different word, but I can't say that here. And she said, "We have to try to have fun with this somehow anyway." Carla and I met when she was 17 and I was 20. She was a Wellesley freshman on the younger side and I was a junior. Her West Coast liberal attention was drawn to my very offensive East Coast, then Republican, poster shaming Ted Kennedy, who was running for president at the time. She succinctly pointed out with her acerbic wit that the poster was in very poor taste and should not be hanging in the hallway. She was not wrong, and I took it down. I didn't want to, upset her delicate freshman's sensibilities. And what I remember about the time, and I really wish I could remember exactly how she phrased it, but the fact that she kind of made me admit my sin, but that I was laughing hysterically at the way that she had phrased it. And what I was to learn over the years of friendship was that in addition to her razor-sharp wit, she was wicked smart, super organized, like no one I've ever met, honest to the core, and she admired those characteristics in everyone. In olden times at Wellesley, juniors had singles and freshmen had doubles. Carla did not get along especially well with her roommate her freshman year, and ended up studying in my room a fair bit of the time as I lived only 2 doors down. By second semester, she had secured herself a single in the area of our floor, which in the beginning years of the college had served as the quarters for the servants that people brought with them. Her room was very, very, very tiny, not much bigger than the coat closet down the hall. And she arranged it so that it was extremely serene and functional. And I'd like to think this was probably the beginning of her love of small, tiny, tight spaces. But part of making her tiny room homey was putting a carpet into the room. And she and I went down to the town of Wellesley, and we walked into the carpet store, purchased a carpet for her room and one for mine. It was about a mile in and a mile out. And we walked the carpets back because we were too cheap to pay for the $15 delivery charge or whatever it was at the time. And she was on one end, I was on the other. We lugged one carpet up and came back and lugged the other one up. And we just consoled ourselves with the fact that we were modeling the strength of women at the time. To say we were exhausted, though, and sore the next day would be an understatement. That first year of friendship saw us engaging in conversations of all types, with one focused on the nature of religion, spirituality, and God. It was a conversation that would continue over the years, especially the last 2 weeks of her life. That initial discussion led us to finding a course on the philosophy of religion in which we both enrolled. And we frequently had differences of opinions over matters philosophical and religious, but we were each consistent in our reasoning. And so Carla was one to always respect the differences, as long as someone was consistent with their argument. In college, she appointed herself my salt shaker keeper. At the time, I suffered from terrible migraines and high blood pressure, and Carla took it upon herself to make sure that I never saw salt again. And if you've ever seen Carla not yielding, you know what I'm talking about. You just didn't take that on. So she took the salt shaker, and what do you know? My headaches got better. My favorite college memories of Carla were from my senior year. Wellesley always had a long winter break of 6 or 7 weeks. And so before we went home to our families for winter break one year, we had to figure out what to do with all of our plants, because Carla and I, at the time, both had really amazing plant collections in our dorm rooms. At the time, I was still good with houseplants. I kill everything I get now. We rustled up some clear plastic trash bags and thread, masking tape, mugs full of water, and we concocted this amazing little greenhouse in my room. And when we came back, discovered that our plants had never looked better in our absence, and we were pretty chuffed about all that. My absolute favorite memory of her from college, though, was that senior spring. We had our second blizzard of the year, and it snowed for like 2 or 3 days. And finally, on the morning, when it stopped, Carla and I decided to take a walk. I have no idea why we thought that was a good idea, but we did. We went outside and discovered the absolute beauty and the quiet and the peace that those kinds of storms bring. The snow was waist high. It seemed like Narnia without the Snow Queen. We even had the lampposts at Wellesley that looked like that. The plows had just started, but mostly we were on our own on the campus, and we covered a fair bit of the campus before giving in to fatigue and cold. We marveled at the beauty and the raw power of nature. We also had a lot of fun in college, Julie, Carla, and a bunch of us, where we would sit in front of the fire in our dorms. It was still the time before lawyers when we could light fires in our fireplaces on campus, and we always sat around and solved the problems of the world in an evening. After I left Wellesley, I began my career and started grad school about the time Carla received her degree from MIT, and I went to her graduation there. I don't recall seeing her again until Julie's wedding when she met Steve. And at that point, Carla was still with the National Park Service. And she picked me up from the airport to bring me to the wedding festivities and drove me back through the Louisiana heat. Carla was a frugal person and did not like to waste money. And at the time, she did not put air conditioning in her car because she was from California and she didn't need it. However, all the national parks she went to were in nasty, nasty heat and humidity. So picture, if you will, we were driving back or driving to the festivities, and it had just rained. All the little peeper frogs were running across the road, and we had to drive with the windows down because it was so hot. And we just laughed hysterically because all we did was run over these poor little peeper frogs. And again, gallows humor came in. Over the years, Carla would delight in playing travel advisor as she found adventure and beauty in all new things. Carla loved playing that armchair travel advisor when my husband and I went on a 6-month road trip. And she would say, "Oh, you're right near this great taco place, turn," she would follow along on the map. And we never missed a place that she recommended. She also gave great advice on the national parks, naturally, as a former ranger. And she included her review of the Lincoln home, summing it up in one sentence: "It's the house where everybody died." And when we were in our early parenting years, we managed to get together, as Julie said, and we just would not do anything particularly exciting, but we just loved spending time with each other. Fast forward to 4 years ago, pandemic had started, and the three of us, as Julie had said, had these weekly Zoom calls. We all were held up by those calls. At the time, I was going through difficult things, and Julie and Carla helped me, and we just went around in the circle. And we felt very blessed to have this opportunity to share friendship in a whole other way and to encourage each other. When Steve died, Julie and I came down and helped Carla declutter some parts of the house, but then the other shoe dropped when Carla got sick, and she sought treatment at the local hospital and began her own cancer treatment. I was privileged to play a part in her treatment, accompanying her to chemo, other treatments, and doctor's appointments. From the outset, her character, her wit, and her strength was evident to all who encountered her. She fought hard, and her paramount concern through the whole process was for her children, Ruth and Marty. She so wanted to spare them the hard road of a second cancer diagnosis and likely death. She was obsessively organized. I think Rabbi Judy captured that beautifully. She left a binder of how everything in her life worked. We discussed where things were, how they worked, what she wanted. She did not mince words. She did not sugarcoat her situation at any time or pretend it wasn't happening or that everything would be just grand. She was remarkably strong. She wanted to achieve at least 2 more years for her efforts, see her daughter's next birthday, because that was a short-term goal, and take us on that river cruise down the Ohio. The chemo was promising at first, but then shortly before our cruise, it no longer got good results. She got seriously anemic before our journey, but with the help of her oncologist, she very much wanted to make Carla's goal come true. She was shored up, and she was able to go. It really was the best medicine for all of us, and as Julie said, we just had an amazingly good time. She was interested in sharing one of her favorite modes of travel and definitely made us converts to the small river cruise world. The last time Carla went into the National Institutes of Health, she was unable to continue with care because her condition was failing so fast. And we put her in ICU for stabilization for a couple of days. When she was placed in a step-down unit and finally hospiced, it was obvious where her stay was going. The care and the compassion of the staff was extraordinary, and all of her doctors came to pay their respects. One day, there were at least 18 doctors that walked in there, and each one took a great deal of time to express their admiration for her journey and the way that she had fought and the contributions she had made to medicine. She and I had many conversations in those last 2 weeks when I was with her at the National Institutes of Health. A lot of the conversations occurred at night. I was in a pull-out bed, and she was always worried that I was not sleeping well, so she would wake me up to ask me if I was okay. One night, about halfway through her stay, I woke up to find that she was talking to someone, and I couldn't see anyone. And I asked if she was okay. She responded that she was just talking to the worm. That got my attention. And I asked where the worm was, and she said, it's over there on the rock. And I asked if the worm had anything interesting to say, and she said that he was telling her stories. And later we were discussing it, and she said, you know, you really shouldn't worry when I have conversations that make no sense with creatures who are not there. She said, they're helping me work things out. We talked about God, and she said that she thought she had never been very religious, but she believes in a higher power and can only identify her feelings as spiritual. She was deeply comforted, by the cantor at NIH. She came by twice a day to sing for her and pray with her and give her gifts. The head of the research study in which Carla had been a participant came and prayed over her every day. Julie and I prayed for her while we were with her, so she was covered by every religion on the planet, and she was on countless prayer chains across the country. In the end, she died the way she wanted, with her children, family, and friends by her side. They were by her side in both body and spirit. She gave us a little trial run a couple days before she died. She'd been asleep for most of the day, but she bolted awake and said, okay, is everybody ready? Morty assured her that we were all there and that we were all ready. She counted us again to make sure we were all there, just double checking. And she had developed this habit in the last 2 weeks of her life, just taking roll. And she died on Saturday, like she said that she would, and she left a large void. Those last 2 weeks, she had had several visits with her dear friends, Todd and Pam. The visits were very comforting to her. My husband came by and played music for her. Julie, Marty, and Ruth and I were in the hospice suite. Larry was nearby and spent full days with her. She slept a good deal of the time, but did not hesitate to tell us her feelings. Once she woke up, sat up, pointed her finger in Julie's direction, and said, she ought not to procrastinate on grading her exams. And then she went back to sleep. There was one other time when she did not like being the focal point of all our really rapt attention. And she said, you know, how can I put this? She said, you all care just a little too much. So we backed off a little. She told me over and over again through her 2-year ordeal how many blessings she had received during the process of her and journey of her illness. She rarely focused on the negative, and then only was concerned for her children. Marty and Ruth, I'm sure you know that your mother considered you her greatest blessings. Please know that we are here for you should you need help, advice, friendship, hospitality, or you just need somebody old to lean on. Carla was surprised by the outpouring of love and tears at the end. Carla had a penetrating gaze which took everything in, the big and the small things. Like I said, she was able to recognize blessings even in the futile moments of life. So if there's one lesson to take away from her life, please pay attention. There are blessings wherever you are, regardless of circumstances. Carla was a blessing in all of our lives, or we wouldn't be here. As your tribute, go and be a blessing for someone else. Do the right thing, even if it's harder. Look at both sides of a problem and see something from someone else's point of view. Ask questions, especially the hard ones. And above all, take that trip. Take that trip. Take that trip. It sounds like a cliche, but it does require work and practice. It requires deep breaths and infinite patience at times, but there's a reward. Carla, you were deeply loved and admired, and now you are missed in the everyday moments. I hope you are having the best adventure now with your loved ones in heaven.
Hard having Carla staring at me from the computer screen. Hi everyone, Shalom. I'm a longtime friend of Carla's and am here with my wife Pam and my daughter Elena, who also knew her well, having been with me, Pam that is, for over 40 of my 61 years. And I miss Carla dearly, especially for my December upcoming birthday this year, since she would have always reminded me that I should remember that she was several weeks older than I was, and that I should respect my elders. Some attempt at humor on my part would follow along the lines of, assigning age to emotional intelligence rather than chronological intelligence. She'd laugh and just say the same thing again, respect your elders. Carla, I can hear you now, I can say it, so I'm going to take it that your spirit is with us and that you're keeping tabs on what I'm saying. Do feel free to issue any corrections. Carla and I met as babies at our mother's feet when they were newly hired Oakland Symphony musicians. Somewhere in my files, a late 1963 picture of the tour of the four of us appears in the Oakland Tribune with the subtitle reading something to the effect that women can work and have children too. Carla is sitting up pretty straight. I'm, of course, several weeks her junior and quite obviously a male of the species with what's at best a wobbly look. Carla and I have shared memories that date back to age 2 or 3. We spent time together as children going to our mother's concerts, playing in our yards, testing the limits of gravity on hill coasters, and going to the wild northern California coast, Point Reyes, to play at the edge of the water, the rocks and the sand. Our parents also took turns taking us skiing, often staying at a 19th century lodge, the Clear Tappan Lodge, west of Donner Pass in the Sierra Nevada mountains. Carla would always say, be sure to sign up for your chores, a requirement for all who stayed. Carla was going to be the grown-up, even when she wasn't. My sense is that her resilient personality was forged in those early years. Carla and her mother, Jean, often came to visit me on my birthday, where we would have Dungeness crab, and Jean, her mother, would bring a strawberry rhubarb pie. Carla and I became addicted to both and shared such a pie only a few months ago. I didn't appreciate it at the time, but all wasn't crab feasts and pie for Carla in her early childhood. Like her mother, Carla endured in silence everything from the sudden death of a parent to the social duress of being a geek, way before anybody called it anything close to cool. Sorry. And though I personally didn't experience such trauma, I certainly counted myself in with the geeks, or just plain weird. And like my friend Carla, weathered the social stigmas of growing too fast, Carla, and too slow, me, and having very uncool shared extracurricular interests like classical music and nature walks. I tried to change my outer self as time went along in a failed effort to fit in. But Carla stuck by her guns, playing cello at superior levels in local orchestras and becoming a remarkable straight-A student. One day, I was for some reason told to meet Carla at her bus stop. She was coming home from school. She was perhaps a junior or senior at Skyline. She had a huge backpack full of heavy, well-used textbooks. This is before tablets and stuff. We were walking up to her house, me with all my issues as a teenager, and Carla with hers, braces, tall size for her age and gender. And I asked myself, how does she do it? How does she prevail in this cruel environment of immature peers and uncivil brothers? I wanted to give her a hug, a bridge way too far from me in my own age of insecurity, to try and gird her for the challenges she was facing. But she seemed nevertheless to be unfazed, all the while excelling at everything she touched. On that day, we had our snack and got to our homework, friends for sure, but Carla with an inner peace, or at least a seeming inner understanding of what it means to love oneself for what one is, not to be bothered by anything external that didn't matter. I thought about it years later and realized that whether she knew it or not, Carla gave me one of my first lessons in how to be grounded in what one likes and what one thinks, regardless of the fools who are around us. During our college years, we saw each other from time to time during winter and summer breaks, and our paths started to converge more and more due to my renewed attachment to education, our shared interests in the out of doors, and for the conversations about our mother's fairness, mine, and well-being, hers. After college, when my girlfriend and now wife and I visited Carla where she was an intern at the Grand Canyon's Ghost Ranch, these ranger internships are tough to get. And by the time we got there, Carla had come out of her shell entirely, exhibiting an extraordinarily extroverted personality I'd never seen before. She gave serious but humor-filled talks on geology every morning, attended by dozens. We have the pictures outside. And joked how, with us at least, how easy it was to convince tourists that green poop on the canyon rock from the donkeys they rode in on was in fact evidence of prehistoric geological processes. Pam and I were working in the tourist industry at the time, and she loved our new word for the tourist, the Tourons. Next I heard Pam and I were in DC, and Carla was off to grad school at MIT and spending time on NOAA, a scientific ship. I'm realizing that I got some of this out of order, so I guess I'm experiencing my own age issues. Those experiences all blended together in my mind, but I know she never talked about these experiences with me, and I know they were hard nevertheless, but she told me what they were studying. She tried to explain the gravity thing to me, but I never got it. She was the only woman on that research ship. She mentioned that to me, and I realized how tough that must have been and what steely reserve that required. As fortune would have it, Carla was then posted to Silver Spring, Maryland, near where we lived, which meant seeing her from time to time. She visited me one day about a month after I had contracted hepatitis A during our honeymoon in Cancun in 1989, and Pam was away in Indiana at her father's funeral, and there was Carla at my front door, loyal to the fault, family, the sister I never had, calm, cool, collected, having already researched what one might do to hasten liver recovery. Remember, this is pre-internet. There were always books. She'd gone to the library and figured it out for me. One day, Pam and I were picking up Carla and her boyfriend Steve at her house to go out for dinner, and she announced as we drove away that they were going to the PX the following week to buy rings. Well, I'm a little slow. It took me a minute to understand. I pulled the car over to the curb and turned around to say congratulations. Both unknowingly had slightly rueful grins on their faces, happy for themselves and each other, in love and happy to show it. They moved to Yellow Springs for Steve's job at Wright-Patterson, got married on a warm day in Ohio, and moved into Steve's condo, where Carla modestly called herself Condo Queen, as an indication, I suppose, of what she would endure in substandard living conditions to stay with the man she loved. That somewhat self-deprecating and extremely dry wit always used at its sharpest to describe her own journey. This is while at the same time demonstrating her incredible intellectual and work adaptability, as evidenced by her ability to take a senior level job managing automated payment procedures at a major credit card processing center near Dayton. She was doing stuff then that I can barely get my mind around now, the days of the floppy disk drives. Throughout these adult decades, Carla just got smarter, more analytical, especially on the topic of raising kids, and quite capable of making her way in society. The credit card operation eventually outsourced its work overseas, so what did Carla do? Well, of course, she went and got a law degree. Throughout these adult decades as well, our own access to Carla's extroverted self was evident and a huge gift every time it happened. Whether we spoke about local governance, technology, or the challenges of being a parent or a spouse, or always encountered sharp, respectful, and discerning mind by discerning, and I mean selective, about information and people to whom she would listen or with whom she would share her thoughts. Nothing was more evident in this regard than Carla's relationship with Steve. She got him. He got her. Romantic love accommodating love of self and each other. A loyalty born of each other's intellectual acumen and willingness to listen. With both seeing and understanding and acknowledging each other's faults without prejudice. Once we learned that Carla got sick, we tried to see her all we could. While she tried very much to keep stuff normal at home, she used us to clinically explain what was going on. These were conversations that reminded me of the conversations we'd had when she was helping her mother at the same time. And in fact, she, I think, drew a fair amount of knowledge about her own treatment from having helped others. Instead, this time, she was taking care of herself. Carla was intent that we understand the basic science behind what was going on. It was a way for us all to stay focused, so much so that when it became clear that various last-ditch efforts to extend Carla's life were not in the offing, I was in the room when doctors and heads of research program visited out of respect to her. They were sorry they couldn't do more, genuinely sorry. Carla would have none of it. She said, "You've tried everything you can." She wanted to be their fellow scientists, and she was, and she garnered their respects accordingly. Nurses came around NIH, familiar stomping ground by that time, to tell her that she was their favorite patient. And they cried. They meant it. Carla treated everyone well, even those who she saw as deficient in respect. But there was no one she cared about more than her children. Indeed, the only regret I ever heard her voice basically amounted to her sense of loss at not being able to watch them evolve. That is to say, she wasn't only worried about their future without her, but felt genuinely robbed of the loving and wonderful experience that she would miss through interactions with them. She created an alternative reality in her adulthood, an alternative to her own childhood, and wanted to see it play out for her two favorite people in the whole world. So love of self for Carla meant love of each other too, the beautiful and bountiful force multiplier and recompense for the early struggles she'd endured growing up. The last time I saw Carla, I said, "I love you," while holding her hand. I'd never said that to her before. I might have had I really thought about it, but in our early years, like our parents, we were tight-lipped about our feelings, especially those that run deep. Carla's eyes focused on mine, and she sat a bit forward in a strong and unwavering voice. "I love you too." As if it was so matter of fact, so normal, and so reciprocated, the easiest thing and the most obvious thing to say. It was as if she was saying, "I too have figured it out. Wish I could stick around for the journey." Thank you very much, and thank you for letting me join today in honoring Carla and allowing me to share with you Carla's legacy of resilience, integrity, intelligence, loyalty, and love. We love you, Carla. You are all in our hearts today.
See if I can get through this. I think with all my practice, I'd be better at it. Carla, obviously, as everyone said, was fiercely independent and logical. I loved what you said about her being a rock in the stream, because that is the image that I have for her. She was good for Steve, and I think Steve was good for her, and it was a blessing when he brought her into our house. I don't know, I think of still waters run deep when I think of Carla. That, there wasn't a whole lot of me. My family and Carla, we fit together well. Because there was Carla that was the epitome of no drama. Always the cool person, the study runner, the person with great advice and all that sort of stuff. And I have to correct what a couple of people earlier said. Carla and Steve met at the Grand Canyon. A couple weeks before the wedding, Steve and I went on vacation, and we talked to a female park ranger there, and no one will ever convince me that it wasn't Carla that we met there. So they formally met at Cameron and Julie's wedding. We met at the Grand Canyon. And that was the first time I got to meet her. Carla, I got to know Carla planning for the wedding. And Carla had an image of the wedding, and Steve had an image of the wedding. And oh gosh, the number of things. I remember a lot of D&D stories here that I think it was Tracy that asked, "Where are you going to get the cake from?" And Carla said, "Well, I don't know where we're going to get the cake." And then Steve came downstairs and said, "We're talking about the cake." It's like, "Yeah, we're getting it at the Belmont Bakery." And she goes, "We are?" And Steve goes, "Yeah, that's where Mom wants to get it." It just went downhill from there. There was the napkins. We don't need to buy napkins. Well, we got to have napkins for the things, and they be engraved. They don't need to be engraved. It doesn't cost anything to engrave them. Okay, we'll get engraved napkins. Then we need the dessert napkins. No, we'll have the same napkins. Well, you got to buy double napkins, so we'll get the thing. And it was just on and on. Steve and Carla had decided that they wanted 2 entrees. And my mom thought they needed to have 3 entrees. And by this point, Carla was just getting fed up with the whole thing and said, we can't afford it. If you want 3 entrees, then you can pay for it. Big mistake. There were 4 entrees. Huge wedding for the people that were there. Her mother, Carla's mother, she wanted live music there. Carla said, you want live music? You pay for it. There was a string quartet at the service, and there was a small orchestra at the reception. It was a beautiful wedding and whatnot, and I know in years after that, Carla said that she was really glad that they had the big wedding, that they were really happy with that. So when Carla came to town, they got married in November. That December happened to be a very cold Ohio. And the first weeks of December, first 2.5 weeks, it was below 0 every day for 2.5 weeks. And after the weather broke, we're at Sunday dinner. Sunday dinner is a big thing in our house. And I mentioned something to the fact of, well, I'm glad that the weather finally broke. And she went, what do you mean broke? And I went, it doesn't get that cold around here. And she went, oh, thank God. But she never complained about the weather. She was just going to go through it. Another thing that took a few years for Carla to get used to was Christmas at our household. As I like to say it, it looks like Santa throw up under, type stuff. And she grew up with a more sparse Christmas than what I was used to celebrating. And it took her a few years to get used to it, and then you could just see over the years that she wouldn't admit it, that she enjoyed it. And then later in life, I know that she knew it was excessive, but she enjoyed the excess of it. And it was fun seeing her change and being able to do that sort of stuff. Again, we had the Sunday dinners. Every Sunday we had dinner. If I didn't mention it on Sunday, we had dinner. Steve ended up, when Marty was around 2, I think, Steve ended up, he had a 2-month thing in DC that I think lasted 9 or 10 months. So Carla is a single mother, I believe working second shift, and actually Tracy and Jeff did a lot of babysitting for Marty back then. And every Sunday we had dinner. And about halfway through this stuff, we're eating dinner, and it must be after dinner or some point during it, and I go, hey Carla, 5 years ago, if someone said to you that in 5 years you're going to be married, you're going to have a child, your husband's going to be TDY, he's going to be away for 10 months, and you're going to look forward to coming to Sunday dinner at your in-laws. And she just laughed hysterically and said, oh my God, no. That was Carla. One of the, for me, of many, many great things she did, she was my proofreader. The number of letters, documents, emails, texts, and whatnot, it's like to send to her to correct the grammar, to maybe take some harshness out, or whatnot. And I don't even remember, it was in the last couple of years something I sent to her to proofread, and she had a grammar correction, and it's like, what about, it was a spelling correction or something, and she goes, well, it's your voice. The grammar and everything is just horrible in this, but it sounds like you're talking. So she was smart enough not to fix what needed to be fixed and not to leave alone the rest of the stuff. We grew even closer when Steve got sick and after she passed, and texted and called all the time, which I know for me was really great. And it's the random phone calls and the texts. I'd see a meme or tell her about a trip I was taking or a run that I did, or just stupid stuff. And half the time what I sent was just stupid stuff, just to have the contact and stay in touch with her. And I've really been amazed how much I've missed that in the last, I have a lot of friends, I'm fortunate with that, but I really miss that rock solid of Carla being there. And I was always very humbled and honored when she asked me for advice and actually did what I said to do. And she's, obviously a very intelligent person, but was smart enough to gather advice from everywhere, and then she did whatever she dang well wanted to do. But she always got all the information before she did that. When my sister, when Cheryl got sick, Carla drove out to come visit her. And that was the first time that she said she felt some discomfort and whatnot. And that was the start of this final journey that we had. And after I was at Cheryl's services, she had said to me that we should go see Hugh Jackman and the Music Man in New York, because that was one of Cheryl's final wishes, that she really wanted to go do that. And I said, yeah, that's great. And about a week later, we're on the phone together, and I bought the tickets for us to go see the Music Man. And it was a week later she got the diagnosis that she had cancer and everything that was going on. She was able to make that trip, and we just had a great time in New York. I mean, she was a little slower and whatnot, but seeing New York's Carla was, Carla's New York was a whole lot of fun, and I really enjoyed that. She was a member of our family, and I think starting out she was a little surprised by it, and she enjoyed being it, and she enjoyed being separate, but she truly was a second sister to me. And if I ever wanted to make her smile, I would always look at her and say, you know, you're my favorite in-law. And then she would always say, not a very high bar. Sorry, Bob, thank you. When the movie Encanto came out, The Family Madrigal was one of her favorite songs. And that movie sort of fits with Carla and our family and everything else, that a big giant family with everyone having the gifts to do it, everyone doing all their stuff, and it all coming together. Because nothing was more Carla than being a big mama bear for the kids and Steve. She did not like it when Cheryl and I would have sibling comments about her husband. You know, she did not enjoy that, and she didn't love anything more than she loved her 2 kids. And as I wrote in my Facebook post and Rabbi Judy, I just want to say to Carla, thank you for everything. Say hi to Steve, Mom and Dad, Cheryl, and your mom for me. Thank you.
She would have laughed at that. Hello. For some reason, whenever I sat down to write this, I felt like I had to preface it with an introduction of who I am. And then about a minute later, each time, I would realize that if you're here, you know who I am. But just in case, I'm Ruth. I'm Carla's second-born child. The firstborn I just got in the middle of the firstborn's hug with her uncle. And I want to thank everyone for coming here today to remember and support my mom. Back in 2021, my mom spoke at my dad's memorial service, right here, and ran through a timeline of my dad's diagnosis and treatment. She mentioned later to Marty and I that people had let her know that they found that helpful, since it can be difficult to keep up with the details of other people's lives when we don't see them all that regularly. And as she noted in her remarks, my dad wasn't one for publicly sharing details of his health. My mom was not unlike him in this way. So in recognition of that, and in tribute to my mom's own rundown, I'm going to try and give a summary of my own. I'm going to retread a lot of ground that Karen already talked about. Thank you, Karen, for once again laying the foundation for me to do something for my mom. I want to preface, though, by saying that she was a lot better at remembering dates than I am. It's not one of my strong suits. So please prepare yourself for a lot of about-thens and a bit later. Around 2 years ago, my mom was admitted to the emergency room near our home for a buildup of fluid in her abdomen, and a test of that fluid revealed the presence of malignant cancer cells. She was referred to the Inova Shar Cancer Institute in Annandale, Virginia, where she was officially diagnosed with endometrial cancer. She started chemotherapy shortly after being diagnosed, and over the next few months completed her first round of treatment. After a couple of weeks of recovery, she had a hysterectomy in August of 2022 and was in recovery from surgery for a month or 2. And after that was scheduled to check in with her oncologist every couple of weeks. One of these check-ins, her oncology team found evidence of tumor growth in and around her liver. Usually tumor regrowth so quickly after chemotherapy indicates a resistance to treatment,
But the turnaround was so close, and my mom's initial response had been so strong that she and her oncology team decided to try another round. But unfortunately, that round of chemo quickly confirmed her tumor's resistance, so her oncologist referred her to the NIH facility in Bethesda, Maryland, to look for alternative treatment. The thing about the NIH Clinical Center is that the treatments you get there, as Karen mentioned, are clinical trials. You go into it knowing that you may not qualify for some treatments, and that even if you do qualify, there's no guarantees. Everything is still in the testing phase. My mom once spoke to me about a shift in mindset that she experienced when she moved to NIH. A realization that, while everyone would be ecstatic if a treatment worked, the goal wasn't just curing her anymore, but also contributing to some human knowledge of how these new treatments could affect endometrial cancer, so that someday more people would be able to survive it. Her first treatment at NIH was an immunotherapy treatment, not chemotherapy, which means, as some of you may have seen in pictures, that her hair did grow back. She was on this treatment for a little while, and while she did have a bit more energy than when she was on chemo, she was also experiencing some chills and fevers, and thus was not completely unhappy when she was told that it was time to move on to the next qualifying treatment. The NIH study doctors are very decisive, and they move very quickly. As soon as it's clear a treatment isn't working, they take you off of it so that you can move on to another trial as quickly as possible. She was able to do that turnaround fairly quickly, and she started her next treatment, a study drug currently being called Neo-210, late last year. She received 2 infusions, about 4 weeks in total, before she started experiencing extreme fatigue and confusion in the middle of January. We initially thought this was a side effect of her pain medication, but when she went in for her next infusion, the medical staff quickly admitted her to the ICU for extremely low sodium. She was treated for low sodium and stabilized enough to meet with the study doctors, where they determined that the trial drug was not having an effect. And after a few days, she was transferred to the in-hospital hospice facility on January 22nd, where we were able to stay and visit with her until she passed the afternoon of Saturday, January 27th. When my mom was initially diagnosed, she said she wanted to make it 2 more years. And as on schedule as she always was, she did. She made it to 2 more of Marty's birthdays, 2 more of mine, and 2 more of her own. She made it long enough to visit people, to go on a river cruise with Julie and Karen and Chris. She went to New York with Uncle Larry, she went to New York with me, and then she went to New York with me and with Gowrie. We're big fans of the Amtrak Northeast Regional train, I have to say. And she made it long enough to finish knitting a sweater with a split collar for easy infusion port access in the overconditioned hospital suites. That sweater, by the way, is a purple merino wool blend, and it lives in my closet now. My mom was one of my favorite people. Growing up, I loved her as my mother, and as I got older, I was privileged to be able to love her as my friend. Once, a couple years ago, I told her that I had never really completely comprehended that some people have difficult relationships with their parents until after I went to college. Because as a kid and a teenager, I never had that problem. I had a great relationship. My parents were married for 31 years, which ended up being about half of both their lives. My dad had a few years head start in the late 50s, and my mom evened things out in the 2020s. I was only around for about 24 years of their marriage, but I am lucky to have had both of my parents for parents, and I'm extremely thankful for the time I was able to spend with them as an adult. A couple people have noted that my mom was a little bit of an introvert, and I inherited that. My mom was the kind of person you could be quiet with. Anyone who knows me well knows that I'm a bit of a homebody, and that my idea of a fun night is one spent on the couch, reading or watching a movie, or failing at playing a video game, and occasionally spouting whatever nonsense comes to my head that I feel like sharing. I'm so thankful that I was able to have years of nights like this with my mom. I would play something with a soundtrack she liked to listen to, and she would knit or work on a crossword puzzle, and we'd comfortably pass the evening together. My mom liked doing crossword puzzles. We had a book of Will Shortz's Best, a collection of the New York Times Sunday puzzles, and of course every weekend there's the puzzle in the Washington Post. She'd share the occasional clue, usually related to pop culture or something theater, or she'd let me know when she found a typo in the text, which happened more often than you might think. But I actually think this was one of the times that, when she was doing crossword puzzles, was one of the times that Marty and I most annoyed her. Because there's really nothing like the siren song of somebody else doing a crossword puzzle to draw you into bothering them. She weaponized it for me, though, which I think was a true show of love. If Marty and I were playing a game together and I was losing more than normal, she'd pull out the post crossword on her iPad and sort of tilt it towards him, and inevitably Marty would crane his neck over to look at the quiz, and I would very briefly believe that I was actually good at the game. My mom was a knitter, which is also something I inherited from her. She knit sweaters and socks, and she spent a year and a bit knitting blankets of different colors. First one for herself, of course, and then others as gifts for people. She knit my dad both an orange and black Cincinnati Bengals hat and a green and white Michigan State hat. And then she turned around and chose colors she actually liked when she was making hats for herself. She knit me a couple pair of socks, which is really a labor of love for those of you who are unfamiliar, because socks get ever more complicated the more you try to fit them to a specific pair of feet. And she knit Marty one of those aforementioned blankets to stop him from borrowing her own. It didn't work. My mom was a graduate of Wellesley, MIT, in the Ohio State's Moritz College of Law. She was a park ranger at the Grand Canyon, an officer in the NOAA Corps, and they were mapping the ocean floor, is what she always told me. So I don't know how true that was, but that's the answer she gave me. And she was a better cellist than I ever managed to be. I wish I could tell you everything she did and everything she was, but it would take a lifetime to do that, and a recounting wouldn't do her half the justice she deserved. I wasn't there for half my mom's life, but the half I was there for was a joy to be part of and something I will never be without. At the end of her remarks for my dad, my mom told a story about when he was a winner on Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, NPR's quiz show. The prize for winning is a message on your answering machine recorded by Carl Castle, but my dad never claimed it because he never came up with the perfect limerick. To finish her remarks, my mom wrote a limerick for her dad. As Rabbi Judy says, we've always been a poetry family. And in collaboration, I have written a second verse for her. I'll read first the one she wrote, and then finish it with what I wrote for her. I'm sorry you're getting dead air. It seems that there's nobody there. So until he comes back, please tell us your facts, and we'll pass your words on to Steve Scher. But if you call and the line's occupied, and you can't quite get through, though you've tried, you might have a long wait while they finish their date, because Carla has lately arrived. Thank you.
And so we turn in our service to the prayers she so loved, whether she believed them or not, I don't know. But the prayers, I understand, the Jewish prayers brought her comfort, as did probably the Muslim prayers, the Christian prayers, the Hindu prayers, all the prayers. And so we continue our service with the El Malei Rachamim, which prays that her soul will be bound up with the bond of life as she is, as we say, returned unto her kin. We rise together. El Malei Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Hamsei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei HaShekhinah, B'ma'alot Kiddushim U'Tihorim, Kizor Arakia, Mazirin, Et HaNishmat Hazot Shahalka, La'olama, Ana Ba'al HaRachamim, Hastireha B'Seter Kanafecha La'olamim, Utzror B'Tzror HaChayim, Et Nishmata, B'Gan Eden Tehei Menuchata, Adonai Hu Nachalata, V'Tanuach B'Shalom Al Mishkavaha, v'no mahar, v'no mahar. Amen. Compassionate source of all that is, who is present in the heavens, take Carla, our loved one, under your holy, glorious wings that shine like the sky. In the name of her soul, please, compassionate one, provide rest for her soul of our loved one in Gan Eden, and never withdraw your protective wings. May Carla's soul be bound up in the bond of life. God is her everlasting inheritance and peaceful resting place, as we say, Amen. And we turn now to our Kaddish prayer, a prayer which speaks not of death, as we were not to do today, but speaks of what a wonderful life she had, for which we give thanks for the one who bestows life on all. Yit gadal v'yitkadash shamei rabbah, v'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'hayechon uvyomechon, uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, b'agala ubizman kariv v'imru, amen. Yehei shamei rabbo mevarach leolam ulol me'al maya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yipoar v'yitronam v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei kedusha berichu. L'el amin tol birkata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechemata da'amiran bi'ama v'imru amen. Yehei shalom araba min shamaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Osei shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the one who makes shalom, harmony and peace and wholeness on high, bring peace to us, to all of Israel and to all the world. And we say, amen. And we are seated. We hope for shalom, for peace, for the entire family and for this congregation. A shalom that she will watch over because she is with us and we aren't complete without her. And so she will be with us every step of the way. Following our service, we will have a luncheon and an opportunity to share moments of joy and good memories and wonderful experiences and stories with the family. And so in conclusion, in the rising of the sun and in its going down, we'll remember Carla. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we'll remember her. In the opening of the buds and in the rebirth of spring, we'll remember her. In the blueness of the sky and in the warmth of the sun, we'll remember her. In the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we'll remember her. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we'll remember her. When we are weary and in need of strength, we'll remember her. When we are lost and sick at heart, we'll remember her. When we have joys we yearn to share, we'll remember her. So long as we live, Carla will live, because she is now a part of us, and we remember her. Our service is now complete, and please join the family